It's a struggle. Life's a struggle. A Monday morning may be a struggle for a lot of you in a job that you despise, working for a boss that you despise. A slave to money, then we die. God bless you.
You're all pretty much fucked. You don't know it yet, but you're the ninja generation. No income, no job, no assets. You got a lot to look forward to.
You've got a small group of multinational corporations who control the entire food system.
We have been lied to in every military escapade, frankly, over the last 50 or 60 years, without exception.
What are we then? Consumers.
Our civilization is not flying because it's not built according to the laws of aerodynamics for civilizations that would fly. And of course the ground is still a long way away, but some people have seen that ground rushing up sooner than the rest of us have. The visionaries have seen it and have told us it's coming.
In a world where 1% of the population owns 40% of the planet's wealth, in a world where 34,000 children die every single day from poverty and preventable diseases, and where 50% of the world's population lives on less than $2 a day, one thing is clear: something is very wrong.
We're leaving a terrible legacy of poison and diminishment of the environment for our grandchildren's grandchildren, generations not yet born. Some people have called that intergenerational tyranny, a form of taxation without representation levied by us on generations yet to be. It's the wrong thing to do.
I first learned it from my grandmother. Now, my grandmother was a wonderful person. She taught me how to play the game Monopoly. She understood that the name of the game is to acquire. She would accumulate everything she could, and eventually she became the master of the board. And then she would always say the same thing to me. She'd look at me and she'd say, "One day, you'll learn to play the game." One summer, I played Monopoly almost every day, all day long. And that summer, I learned to play the game. I came to understand the only way to win is to make a total commitment to acquisition. I came to understand that money and possessions, that's the way that you keep score. And by the end of that summer, I was more ruthless than my grandmother. I was ready to bend the rules if I had to win that game. And I sat down with her to play that fall. I took everything she had. I watched her give her last dollar and quit in utter defeat. And then she had one more thing to teach me. Then she said, "Now it all goes back in the box." All those houses and hotels, all the railroads and utility companies, all that property and all that wonderful money, now it all goes back in the box. None of it was really yours. You got all heated up about it for a while. But it was around a long time before you sat down at the board. And it will be here after you're gone. Players come and players go. Houses and cars, titles and clothes, even your body. Because the fact is that everything I clutch and consume and hoard is going to go back in the box, and I'm going to lose it all. You have to ask yourself, when you finally get the ultimate promotion, when you've made the ultimate purchase, when you buy the ultimate home, when you have stored up financial security and climbed the ladder of success to the highest rung you can possibly climb it, and the thrill wears off, and it will wear off, then what? How far do you have to walk down that road before you see where it leads? surely you understand, it'll never be enough. So you have to ask yourself the question, what matters?
Son, nothing else in the world smells like that. I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
A lot of shit comes up that people would want to vote on, like the bailouts, the war, all things of this nature. There's a lot of things that people would like that's going to affect us. We would like to vote on this, but you don't get to vote on it. You get to vote on a representative. These people are going to represent you once they get into office. And think about some of the laws that are in place to protect corporations. Think about some of the laws that are in place that fuck people over every day. They wouldn't be there if people were voting for them. We all have this desire to have someone lead us. We all have this feeling where we need someone who's smarter and wiser, who represents us. You know, and when you're really fucking dumb, the problem is really dumb people, they get a say in everything too. And they're subject to a lot of tricks. They're subject to nationalism. They're subject to these kind of ridiculous rah, rah, rah America speeches that don't say jack shit. They say nothing. It's all just this cheerleading fucking event. And they're subject to it. They can't help it. They're dumb. They don't know they're being bullshitted. They grew up around dumb people. They go to work with dumb people. There's no one in their family that's interesting or asks any questions at all. And they just get sucked right into it, man. This society is so greedy, we're willing to go to war. We're willing to go places and send these big metal machines that kill people and fuck people up just so we can make more money. And the way our society is set up, I mean, I've heard it argued, and argued successfully, that our society runs on war. You know, it runs on the domination of the other parts of the world.
There's no better example probably than Vietnam, where you had the President of the United States and the top generals in the Pentagon out and out lying about the Gulf of Tonkin incident that got us into the war, about the casualties, about how the war was going. Anyone who has ever looked closely at the Vietnam War can see that the public and the media were manipulated substantially.
Generals gathered in their masses.
I remember when I saw JFK, the Oliver Stone movie, and that was like part of the premise that JFK, that Oliver Stone was pushing in this film, is that they killed JFK because they wanted to stay in Vietnam because they were making a lot of money in Vietnam. And I remember at the time seeing that movie going, that is absolutely ridiculous. Who the fuck believes that? Are they going to start wars and keep wars going just so that they can make money, even though it's not a real war, it's not a just war? Nobody wants to go to war. That's stupid hippie bullshit. Well, as I got older and I started investigating history, you know, from way back to Vietnam, to the Gulf of Tonkin, to all the shit that happened when Kennedy and Nixon were in office, to all the shit that happened with Reagan and the Contras in Nicaragua and the Sandinistas, and all the different various things that have happened in human history, where it's clear that the United States is, you know, we're fucking around with all kinds of things all the time to make money. And that there's a bunch of people that are profiting off of war. And then they're not just profiting like a little bit of money here and there. You know, you look at like what's going on with like how much money Halliburton made from the war. We're talking like billions and billions of dollars. That's like real money. Eisenhower leaving office, and he's giving a speech warning the American people about the power of the military-industrial complex. You know, when you watch that, you're like, well, here is a sitting president who's leaving office, but the most important thing that he wants to tell people is that you have to be careful because there's a machine here that wants to go to war. There's a business behind going to other countries and fucking people up and taking their shit. And they come up with reasons to do this. And they sacrifice American lives to do this. And they do it for profit. And it sounds absolutely ridiculous. It sounds absolutely outrageous that the greatest country on earth could be involved in something like that from the get-go. But yet, that's what history says. That's how it points. It points in that direction. It points in that direction that it's going in.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. 3 of these involved our own country. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications.
Human history is littered with the corpses of people who had stuff worth stealing. Animals, water, shiny things, fertile land, spices.
Nutmeg slice. Tea?
But when it came to stuff worth pinching, one continent had it all. Ivory, copper, cotton, rubber, wood, tin, gold, diamonds, and people. As cheap energy, slaves were unbeatable until a less troublesome energy source was discovered and a new era began. Human numbers increased 5 times over, and with each person wanting more and more stuff, oil became the resource worth fighting for all around the world.
My fellow Americans, major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
Evil minds that plot destruction. In the fields, the bodies burning. And hatred to mankind. Oh Lord, yeah.
It's a clusterfuck, man. These poor fucking kids, man. Could you imagine being 18, 19, being talked into doing this shit for a bunch of bloodthirsty motherfuckers who just are trying to get whatever they're trying to get over there, whatever the fuck it is, whether it's lithium, you know, minerals in the mountains that they use to make cell phones, whether it's 90% plus of the world's opium supply, 90% that is a multi-billion-dollar business. And if you think these fucking industrialist cocksuckers that are running the world are gonna leave that money behind, you're fucking crazy. Dude, they've got United States Army troops guarding Poppy Field. There's fucking so much heroin there. I mean, it's incredible. The fucking brother of the president of Afghanistan, his brother was selling heroin and getting paid by the CIA. I mean, god damn it. Heroin is absolutely addictive, okay? People who try heroin get hooked. Heroin is everywhere, okay? So you need to sell it. Someone's selling it. Who's selling it? I don't know, but 90% of it comes from this one place where we have to be to save our freedom.
What is a false flag? The encyclopedia definition reads, false flag operations are covert operations conducted by governments, corporations, or by other organizations which are designed to appear as if they were carried out by other entities. The name is derived from the military concept of flying false colors, that is, flying the flag of a country other than your own. And now the Gulf of Tonkin incident. In the summer of 1964, President Lyndon Baines Johnson needed a pretext to commit the American people to the already expanding covert war in Southeast Asia.
3 communist PT boats attacked an American destroyer off the coast of Vietnam yesterday, and today President Johnson's response was hard and tough.
To any armed attack upon our forces, we shall reply. To any in Southeast Asia who ask our help in defending their freedom, we shall give it.
In November of 2001, the LBJ Presidential Library and Museum released tapes of phone conversations with the President and then Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, where they openly discussed plans to use the staged Gulf of Tonkin incident as a pretext to expand the war. Then, in late 2005, the National Security Agency declassified its own official history of the Gulf of Tonkin and admitted that intelligence agency officers had deliberately skewed the intelligence and claimed that Vietnamese patrol boats had attacked U.S. destroyers on August 4, 1964, when in reality they had done nothing, even while being fired on by U.S. forces. Congress then authorized the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. The Tonkin Lie paved the way for 58,000 American deaths and over 1.5 million dead Vietnamese.
And now the breathing, the crime of the century. Oh, what will it be?
Operation Northwoods was something that was plotted out during the 1960s, signed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where they were going to fake terrorist attacks on American civilians and blame it on the Cubans so we could go to war with Cuba. It involved a bunch of shit, like blowing up a jetliner. They were going to have a drone jetliner and blow it up and say that people died on it, and this was going to get everybody fired up about going to war with Cuba. They were even going to attack Guantanamo Bay. They were going to arm Cuban friendlies to attack Guantanamo Bay so that we would have to go to war with Cuba. This is like our own government. They plotted this out. This is like real shit.
On October 6, 1976, 2 time bombs made of C4 planted on a Douglas DC-8 aircraft exploded, killing all 73 people on board in the most deadly act of airline terrorism in the Western Hemisphere until September 11, 2001. The plane was carrying Olympic athletes from 3 countries, including gold medal winners from Cuba. Declassified FBI and CIA documents show that the convicted bombers of the flight had been given U.S. visas just days before the attack, and that they were in the employ of the U.S. government. This had been reported on in respected publications for years, but has now been confirmed by multiple declassifications. Cuban plane bomber was CIA agent. Declassified U.S. government documents show that a man suspected of involvement in the bombing of a Cuban passenger plane worked for the CIA.
Read all about their schemes and adventure. Yes, it's well worth the fee.
But as we went through all these photographs, we could find no pictures whatsoever showing a tail, a nose, a fuselage, wings, engine, wheels, luggage, seats, nothing. There were no photographs showing any recognizable wreckage from a 757. Furthermore, when you look at the size of the hole at the Pentagon, it was approximately 65 feet across, and the height of the Pentagon is approximately 73 feet. From wingtip to wingtip, a 757 is 124 feet 10 inches. From nose to tail,
A 757 is 155 feet and 3 inches in length, and the height is 44 feet and 6 inches. However, when you look at the hole at the Pentagon, you'll find that it's only approximately 65 feet across. How does a plane of those dimensions fit into a hole only 65 feet across? Upon further inspection, we found that the damage at the Pentagon was completely and totally inconsistent with the damage of the planes that had hit the World Trade Center. I mean, after all, the planes that hit the Trade Center created a fire so intense that it fatigued the steel and collapsed the buildings, or so that's what we were told. And yet, when you look at the left side of the Pentagon, you'll note that there is very little, if any, smoke damage or heat damage at all. On the third floor, it's very plain to see a file cabinet with a computer monitor. Neither of them are damaged. On the second floor, you can see a wooden desk. It hasn't burned. And on the first floor, a very curious sight indeed, a wooden stool with a book that is laying and open. The pages aren't even singed.
We don't like to think of ourselves as a militant nation, but we are in fact an incredibly militant and militaristic nation. It's not a view of ourselves that we want to carry around, but the fact is we are. If the president and the military-industrial complex, the defense establishment, if they all have decided that suddenly there's a problem somewhere, we need to drop some bombs or even put land forces somewhere in some country, this is a ritual that we have been seeing for decades. We've toppled governments, we've done coups d'etats, we've used intelligence services for covert purposes and done horrible things around the world, and we have put up with the most heinous human rights abusing countries. We have propped them up, we've even trained them how to commit human rights abuses. Today's demon was yesterday's friend, all in the name of either the Cold War or for commercial reasons. It's basically economic colonialism. No one uses the colonialism word, but instead of just taking over the countries, we have a better way. We just go in and have free markets. Whether we're trying to sell our products to their citizens or we're trying to mine their resources, we need to be in that country for some reason, and therefore we're going to talk about free markets, free trade. But what's really going on is we want our companies to get rich in your country.
Someone reminded me the other evening that I once said, greed is good. Now it seems it's legal. But folks, you know, it's greed that makes my bartender buy 3 houses he can't afford with no money down. And it's greed that makes your parents refinance their $200,000 house for $250,000. And then they take that extra $50,000 and they go down to the mall. They buy a plasma TV, cell phones, computers, an SUV. And hey, why not a second home while we're at it? Because gee whiz. I mean, we all know the prices of houses in America always go up, right? And it's greed that makes the government in this country cut the interest rates to 1% after 9/11. So we could all go shopping again.
150 years ago, the business corporation was a relatively insignificant institution. Today, it is all pervasive. Like the church, the monarchy, and the Communist Party in other times and places, the corporation is today's dominant institution.
You are an old man who thinks in terms of nations and peoples. There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West. There is only one holistic system of systems.
we economic hitmen have managed to create the world's first truly global empire, and it's basically a secret empire. We do it many ways, but principally we identify a country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sisters. The money never actually goes to the country. It goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country that help a few very wealthy people, but don't benefit the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity or have cars to drive on the highways, and yet they're left holding a huge debt that they can't repay. So we go back at some point and say, you know, you can't pay your debts. Give us a pound of flesh. Sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies. Vote with us on the next critical UN vote. Allow us to build a military base in your backyard. Something along these lines. And when we fail, the jackals go in and either overthrow or assassinate these leaders. And if the jackals fail, as they did in Iraq, then we send in the military. I don't think the failure is capitalism. I think it's a specific kind of capitalism that we've developed. We've created what I consider a mutant, viral form of capitalism. And this mutant form of capitalism, which I think is really a predatory form of capitalism, has created an extremely unstable, unsustainable, unjust, and very, very dangerous world. I've met a lot of terrorists. I've interviewed them for books. I've never met one who wanted to be a terrorist. They're desperate people. If we want to get rid of terrorism, we must get rid of the root causes, that cancer that is destroying our whole system. Because I think it's really important that we understand today we cannot have homeland security unless we understand that the whole planet is our homeland.
Globalization is the most powerful force for change in the world today, affecting not only remote populations like the Ladakhis, but societies across the planet.
Why are American cities designed so it's almost impossible not to have a car? Why were 100 railways in cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles bought up and then deliberately destroyed? Why did the electric car get scrapped? Why were we, along with Australia, the only two countries not to sign the original Kyoto Climate Treaty? Why was an oil company lobbyist allowed to change official government reports on global warming? Why was the same PR firm employed by the tobacco industry to persuade the public that smoking is healthy, then employed by the oil industry to convince us there was still doubt about climate change? Alternative energy has been available for 50 years. Why have we barely used it? Why were solar panels taken off the White House? Because, right from the early days of the industry, the oil men and their obscene profits have had an unhealthy influence on the people running our country. And now, they are the people running our country. And they're providing the cash, too. The oil business isn't just in bed with the government, it is the government.
We often hear about efficiencies of scale, but actually the truth is what we've developed today is a system that could not be more wasteful. We have tuna fish caught on the east coast of America, flown to Japan, processed, flown back to America and sold to consumers. We have English apples flown to South Africa to be waxed, flown back again to be sold to consumers. The whole process involves incredible quantities of waste.
A series of treaties, new ones almost every year, promote economic growth through international trade. As a consequence, countries today routinely import and export nearly identical quantities of identical products. Every day of the year, grain, meat, live animals, canned goods, and a whole range of manufactured products, not to mention waste, even used batteries, crisscross the planet. All of this at a time when rising CO2 emissions are threatening our very survival.
Back in 2005 and 6, Citigroup wrote 3 confidential memos to their wealthiest investors
about how things were going. They reached the conclusion that the United States was no longer really a democracy, but had become a plutonomy, a society controlled exclusively by and for the benefit of the top 1% of the population, who now had more financial wealth than the bottom 95% combined. The memo gloated about the growing gap between rich and poor and how they were now the new aristocracy, and that there was no end in sight for the gravy train they were on.
If the global economy is such a destructive force, why do policymakers continue to promote it? More than anything, perhaps, it's because they believe that the world needs what globalization is supposed to deliver: economic growth.
Economic growth means strength and vitality.
Not only our economies, but our societies, our political systems, the entire culture is focused on making sure that our GDP grows as fast as possible.
And I stand for programs that will mean growth and progress.
It's as if every problem we have can be solved by increasing GDP.
Economic growth is the key to the future of this country.
Poverty is the problem, more economic growth is the answer. Unemployment is the problem, more economic growth is the answer. Environmental decline is the problem, more economic growth is the answer.
A fiscal stimulus plan that will jumpstart economic growth is long overdue.
Using GDP as a measure of societal progress is little short of madness. If there's an oil spill, GDP goes up. If the water is so polluted we have to buy it in bottles, GDP goes up. War, cancer, epidemic illnesses, all of these things involve an exchange of money, and that means that they end up on the positive side of the balance sheet.
The word corruption is often defined as moral perversion. If a company dumps toxic waste into the ocean to save money, most people recognize this as corrupt behavior. On a more subtle level, when Walmart moves into a small town and forces small businesses to shut down for they are unable to compete, a gray area emerges. For what exactly is Walmart doing wrong? Why should they care about mom-and-pop organizations they destroy? Yet, even more subtly, when a person gets fired from their job because a new machine has been created which can do the work for less money, people tend to just accept that as the way it is, not seeing the inherent corrupt inhumanity of such an action. Because the fact is, whether it is dumping toxic waste, having a monopoly enterprise, or downsizing the workforce, the motive is the same: profit.
A privatization does not mean you take a public institution and give it to some nice person. It means you take a public institution and give it to an unaccountable tyranny.
So why do the 99% put up with this? According to Citigroup, it's because the majority of the electorate believe that someday they will have a chance of becoming well-to-do themselves, if they just keep trying hard enough. The wealthy were pleased that so many people had bought into the American dream, while they, the rich, had no intention of ever sharing it with anyone.
I think the history of the United States as a work in progress and our attempt at democracy here is a constant struggle between capitalism and democracy. And there have been ebbs and flows where democracy looks like it's winning. You rein in those powerful forces. But the fundamental reality is that most of the government's decisions today are substantially dictated by powerful corporate interests. Clearly, capitalism is winning.
Pretty soon now, you know I'm gonna make a comeback.
Few people on this planet know what it is to be truly despised. Can you blame them? I earn a living fronting an organization that kills 1,200 human beings a day. 1,200 people. We're talking 2 jumbo jet plane loads of men, women, and children. I mean, there's Attila, Genghis, and me, Nick Naylor, The face of cigarettes. The Colonel Sanders of nicotine. This is where I work, the Academy of Tobacco Studies. It was established by 7 gentlemen you may recognize from C-SPAN. These guys realized quick if they were going to claim that cigarettes were not addictive, they better have proof. This is the man they rely on. Ernhard von Gruppen-Mundt. They found him in Germany. I won't go into the details. He's been testing the link between nicotine and lung cancer for 30 years and hasn't found any conclusive results. The man's a genius. He could disprove gravity. Then we've got our sharks. We draft them out of Ivy League law schools and give them timeshares and sports cars. It's just like a John Grisham novel. You know, without all the espionage. Most importantly, we've got spin control. That's where I come in. I get paid to talk. I don't have an MD or law degree. I have a bachelor's in kicking ass and taking names. You know that guy who can pick up any girl? I'm him, on crack.
You cannot walk down the street without being bombarded. You stand in an elevator looking at advertising in the corner of the elevator car, and you go to play golf and you go to pick the ball up out of the cup and there's an ad in the bottom of it, and you look up at the sky and there's skywriting, and you look at a bus passing and there's advertising, and you walk in Times Square and you go, is this Las Vegas on the Hudson? Am I trapped inside a pinball machine?
Welcome to the new American metropolis.
Advertising is an infotoxin, a symbolic pollutant that targets our mental environment. Junk food makes us obese, but junk thoughts and advertisements may harm us more, because unlike fast food whose consumption is always intentional, fast thoughts hit us unawares. Walking down the street, our eyes devour billboards whose carefully crafted imagery hit us on a subconscious, spiritual level. We are poisoned by each ad.
Now, I focus on advertising because I've always considered it to be a very powerful educational force. It's an over $250 billion a year industry, just in the United States. The average American is exposed to over 3,000 ads every single day and will spend 2 years of his or her life watching television commercials, just the commercials.
Once a culture becomes entirely advertising friendly, it ceases to be a culture at all. It ceases to be a culture worth the name. It has to have the constant mood that shoppers require. There has to be a kind of muzak playing in the background all the time. Now you think back to those dramas, those comedies that have really stayed with you, that have moved you tremendously, that you want to see again, that you think about for days. Well, those kinds of works are increasingly unlikely when the stuff that's on TV basically functions to sell Pepsis, to sell Nikes, to sell selling, to sell consumption.
Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
Just like skateboards, I've almost made them respectable. You see, I can't always get through you, so I go for your sign.
It's corporations who are raising our children. Who's driving the food choices of children? Who's driving the entertainment choices of children? Who's driving what they want to buy and what they care about? More and more, it's a set of corporations that sell to kids.
It's not the same as when I was a kid, or even when the people who are young adults today were kids. It's much more sophisticated and it's much more pervasive. It's not that products themselves are bad or good. It's the notion of manipulating children into buying the products. One family cannot combat an industry that spends $12 billion a year trying to get their children. They can't do it.
They are tomorrow's adult consumers, so start talking with them now, build that relationship when they're younger, and you've got them as an adult. Somebody asked me, Lucy, is that ethical? You're essentially manipulating these children. Well, yeah, is it ethical? I don't know.
Here it comes, it please the
longer, smaller, lighter, fuller, tighter, thinner, softer. It really works.
The big monopolistic.
Ad strategist Douglas Atkin, an expert on the relationship between consumers and brands, says he had a eureka moment one night during a focus group.
I was in a research facility watching 8 people rhapsodize about a sneaker. And I thought, where is this coming from? This is, at the end of the day, a piece of footwear. But the terms they were using were evangelical. So I thought, if these people are expressing cult-like devotion, then why not study cults? Why not study the original? Find out why people join cults and apply that knowledge to brands.
I'm loyal to this practice because it's done so much for me.
If Atkin could find what pushed a person from mere fan to devoted disciple, perhaps he could market that knowledge.
Most of the people I discuss the WWF with know that it's not a sport. Right. It's a masculine ballet.
So he compared dozens of groups he considered cults with so-called cult brands, from Hare Krishna to Harley Davidson.
If you're smart and kind of individual, that's what you drive.
From Falun Gong to Mac.
I think there's something about Mac users, like they get it.
We just had discovered something.
They realize there are other people like them and they cooperate on certain projects, and it's part of belonging to the tribe.
And the conclusion was this, is that people, whether they're joining a cult or joining a brand, do so for exactly the same reasons. They need to belong and they want to make meaning. We need to figure out what the world is all about, and we need the company of others. It's simply that.
Advertisements and media in general plays a big role in this. Each of us in the U.S. is targeted with over 3,000 advertisements a day. We see more advertisements in 1 year than people 50 years ago saw in a lifetime. And if you think about it, what's the point of an ad except to make us unhappy with what we have? So 3,000 times a day, we're told our hair is wrong, our skin is wrong, our clothes are wrong, our furniture is wrong, our car is wrong. We are wrong, but it can all be made right if we just go shopping.
The campaign for iPod is remarkable. When I see the poster as I'm passing by, when I go on the website and it comes to life, and I hear the music track going, and then when I put my little iPod earpods on, and I see the white cords against my black jacket, I'm in that poster, and the poster is me. And then the music, my music, comes over my iPod, and it's a brand experience.
And this is why most corporations now spend more money on advertising than the actual process of product creation itself. They work diligently to create a false need for you to fill, and it happens to work.
We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. And we're very, very pissed off.
Advertising has poisoned our minds, corrupted our culture, and turned us away from the noble pursuits of virtue, wisdom, and the stewardship of nature. Now we seek only the ephemeral pleasures of consumerism, new gadgets and quick thoughts. Advertising obscures our vision, preventing us from seeing that our civilization is marching towards ecological collapse because of our overconsumption.
Well, I'd find you a house, I would buy you a house. And if I had $1 million, if I had $1 million.
Things you own end up owning you.
75 years ago, consumption in America and much of the First World was half of what we see today per person. Today's new consumer culture has been manufactured and imposed due to the very real need for higher and higher levels of consumption.
So in the U.S., we have more stuff than ever before, but polls show that our national happiness is actually declining. Our national happiness peaked in the 1950s, the same time that this consumption mania exploded. Interesting coincidence. I think I know why. We have more stuff, but we have less time for the things that really make us happy. Friends, family, leisure time. We're working harder than ever. Some analysts say we have less leisure time than any time since feudal society. And do you know what the two main activities are that we do with the scant leisure time we have? Watch TV and shop. In the US, we spend 3 to 4 times as many hours shopping as our counterparts in Europe do. So we're in this ridiculous situation where we go to work, maybe 2 jobs even, and we come home and we're exhausted, so we plop down on our new couch and watch TV, and the commercials tell us you suck, so you gotta go to the mall to buy something to feel better, and then you gotta go to work more to pay for the stuff you just bought, so you come home and you're more tired, so you sit down and you watch more TV, and it tells you to go to the mall again, and we're on this crazy work, watch, spend treadmill, and we could just stop.
So if there is any testament to the plasticity of the human mind, if there is any proof to how malleable human thought is and how easily conditioned and guided people can become based on the nature of their environmental stimulus and what it reinforces, the world of commercial advertising is the proof. You have to stand in awe at the level of brainwashing where these programmed robots known as consumers wander the landscape only to walk into a store and spend, say, $4,000 on a handbag that likely cost $10 to make in a sweatshop overseas, only for the brand status it supposedly represents in the culture.
The will to consume terrorizes you. We're terrorized into being consumers. We have the freedom to choose between brand A and brand B and brand C. That's about it for freedom.
President Eisenhower's Council of Economic Advisors chairman said that the American economy's ultimate purpose is to produce more consumer goods. More consumer goods? Our ultimate purpose? Not provide health care or education or safe transportation or sustainability or justice? Consumer goods? How did they get us to jump on board this program so enthusiastically?
Lots of ideas have tried to take over the world, but there's only one winner. 3,000 adverts bombard us every day. Telling us we'll be happier, more attractive and with better skin if only we buy their products. Together, they create within us an insatiable desire to buy more and more stuff. Americans have been advertised at longest, and they now each consume twice as much energy as the Europeans, 9 times more than a Chinese person, 15 times more than an Indian, and 50 times more than someone from Kenya. If all 6.5 billion people here on Earth consume like Europeans or Japanese, we'd need 2 more planets worth of resources. If everyone consumed like Americans, Australians and Canadians, we'd need another 4. And in 2040 or so, when there's about 9 billion of us, we'll need 2 more again. Capitalism's only goal is ever-expanding growth. But ever-expanding growth on just the one not-expanding planet is impossible. The current economic system is disastrous, not just for the planet, but for most people too. 400 years of capitalism has allowed the richest 1% to take 40% for themselves, leaving just 1% for the poorest half. But anyone wanting to live differently is thwarted at every turn. With profit the only measuring stick, destroying the planet is written into the system, and runaway climate change is a not very surprising result.
And that brings us to the golden arrow of consumption. This is the heart of the system, the engine that drives it. It is so important that protecting this arrow has become the top priority for both of these guys. That's why after 9/11, when our country was in shock, and President Bush could have suggested any number of appropriate things, to grieve, to pray, to hope. No, he said to shop.
If I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a green dress, but not a real green dress. That's louder.
We cannot let the terrorists achieve the objective of frightening our nation to the point where we don't conduct business, where people don't shop.
We shop and shop and shop, keep the materials flowing, and flow they do. Guess what percentage of total materials flow through this system is still in product or use 6 months after their date of sale in North America? 50%? 20? No, 1%. 1. In other words, 99% of the stuff we harvest, mine, process, transport, 99% of the stuff we run through this system is trashed within 6 months. Now, how can we run a planet with that level of materials throughput?
Or perhaps the ancient communal traditions which increased trust and cohesiveness in society, which have now been hijacked by acquisitive, materialistic values, where now annually we exchange useless crap a few times a year. And we might wonder why so many today have a compulsion to shopping and acquisition, when it is clear that they have been conditioned from childhood to expect material goods as a sign of their status with friends and family.
In a nation that was proud of hard work, strong families, close-knit communities, and our faith in God, too many of us now tend to worship self-indulgence and consumption. Human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but by what one owns. But we've discovered that owning things and consuming things does not satisfy our longing for meaning. We've learned that piling up material goods cannot fill the emptiness of lives which have no confidence or purpose.
Seems like everybody's got a price. I wonder how they sleep at night when the sale comes first and the truth comes second.
We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost.
I went to Littleton, Colorado, where the Columbine shooting took place. And I didn't know this, but when I arrived, I learned what the primary job is of the parents of the kids who go to Columbine High School. The #1 job in Littleton, Colorado, they work for Lockheed Martin, building weapons of mass destruction. But they don't see the connect between what they do for a living and what their kids do at school, or did at school. And so I'm kind of, up on my, high horse, thinking about this. And I thought, I said to my wife, we both are, sons and daughters of auto workers in Flint, Michigan. There isn't a single one of us back in Flint, any of us, including us, who ever stopped to think, this thing we do for a living, the building of automobiles, is probably the single biggest reason why the polar ice caps are going to melt and end civilization as we know it. There's no connect between, I'm just an assembler on an assembly line building a car, which is good for people in society. It moves them around. But never stop to think about the larger picture and the larger responsibility of what we're doing. Ultimately, we have to, as individuals, accept responsibility for our collective action and the larger harm that it causes, in our world.
For 21 years, I never gave a thought to what we were taking from the earth or doing to the earth in the making of our products. And then in the summer of 1994, we began to hear questions from our customers we'd never heard before. What's your company doing for the environment? And we didn't have answers. The real answer was not very much. And it really disturbed many of our people, not me so much as them. And a group in our research department decided to convene a task force and bring people from our businesses around the world to come together to assess our company's worldwide environmental position, to begin to frame answers for those customers. They asked me if I would come and speak to that group and give them a kickoff speech to launch this new task force with an environmental vision. And I didn't have an environmental vision. I did not want to make that speech. And at sort of the propitious moment, this book landed on my desk. It was Paul Hawkins' book, The Ecology of Commerce. And I began to read The Ecology of Commerce, really desperate for inspiration. And very quickly into that book, I found the phrase, the death of birth. It was E.O. Wilson's expression for species extinction, the death of birth, and it was a point of a spear into my chest. And I read on, and the spear went deeper, and it became an epiphanal experience, a total change of mindset for myself, and a change of paradigm. Can any product be made sustainably? Well, not any and every product. Can you make landmines sustainably? Well, I don't think so. There's a more fundamental question than that about landmines. Some products ought not be made at all. Unless we can make carpets sustainably, perhaps we don't have a place in a sustainable world, but neither does anybody else making products unsustainably. One day, early in this journey, it dawned on me that the way I've been running Interface is the way of the plunderer. Plundering something that's not mine, something that belongs to every creature on earth. And I said to myself, my goodness, the day must come when this is illegal. That when plundering is not allowed, it must come. So I said to myself, my goodness, someday people like me will end up in jail.
Look at the current system, we're seeing the distance between production and consumption continue to increase. We're seeing the distance between people and power continue to increase. I think economic globalization is responsible for that. It's increasing those trends, and the obvious answer for me is the opposite, and that is economic localization.
We've got to begin localizing our politics, localizing our economies, localizing our cultures, localizing our spirits, even our spiritual natures.
There is only one economics that will make sense. It is local economics. Everywhere.
Localization is a systemic, far-reaching alternative to corporate capitalism. Fundamentally, it's about reducing the scale of economic activity. That doesn't mean eliminating international trade or striving for some kind of absolute self-reliance. It's simply about creating more accountable and more sustainable economies by producing what we need closer to home.
No one's saying there's going to be a complete end
to international trade. But at the very least, we should be saying local needs should come first.
Today, the first of 2 historic town hall meetings will get underway in Arcata, California. 61% of Arcadans voted in favor of publicly discussing whether democracy is even possible when large corporations wield so much wealth and power under law. They also voted to form a committee to ensure democratic control over corporations in Arcata.
Corporations are not accountable to the democratic process. That's what this is about. I don't want to make decisions about everything that goes on in their corporation, but I do have a strong belief that they need to be held accountable to us.
If we don't like certain product, if we don't like Pepsi Cola or Bank of America, or if you don't like what they do, don't use them. That's the way I see the people's power is.
You have a lot more money than me. You have more votes than I do. If we use the model of boycott and voting with your dollars, that's an undemocratic situation.
What are we afraid of? I mean, are all the businesses going to leave Arcata? I don't think so. And if they did, we'd deal with it, or we'd figure it out, or we'd do something different. We're creative people. I just don't see why we're afraid.
If you think it's tough making a decision where to buy your stuff today, how tough do you think it is when there's only one provider, and it's the state? And by the way, you don't get to have this little democracy forum in those communities either.
People that say they fear their government, I really hope that they understand that they're allowed to participate in their government. They're not allowed to participate in anything the corporations do. So don't fear the government. Help it be the government that you won't fear.
If this many people around the country would do this instead of watching Super Bowl Sunday, our nation would be controlled by the people, not by the corporations.
No more chain restaurants in Arcata after a long-awaited decision.
You gonna get out and vote today, Greg? Nah, bro. He's gonna stay in and clock left for dead too, eh? But Greg, your vote can decide so much. It can set the drinking age.
Same again, Dawn.
Or how long kids have to be at school.
It's 10 p.m, miss. Only 2 hours to go then.
It decides taxes.
This year the tax rate will be all your money!
It can decide if we sell our assets.
Yes, we've managed to sell off all the hospitals, but don't worry, we're outsourcing health to India. Way cheaper.
Whether we can have roast kiwi for Christmas.
These wings are a bit stingy.
Or whether Left 4 Dead 3 is allowed to be imported to the country.
Zombies are a bad influence on our children.
Holy shit, are you serious? Greg, move your fat ass. Voting. It decides stuff.
Why is everybody so obsessed? Money can't buy us happiness. Can we all slow down and enjoy right now? Guaranteed we'll be feeling alright.
In the end, the only power that any of these institutions of empire or plutocracy or whatever have are the power that we as citizens yield to them. And they remain in power because we accept their legitimacy. And if we withdraw that legitimacy, they lose their power over us.
We shall have to raise our voice and unite ourselves and help to those people who are telling the truth.
We're here to support folks who are trying to fight against the world's largest, richest, and probably meanest corporation.
I think we need to start imagining an economy that isn't obsessed with economic growth, one whose purpose is not to maximise profits, but to provide high-quality, satisfying jobs, producing goods and services that people really do need.
Across the United States, communities thought that their pathway to prosperity was to attract and retain non-local business. And they've come to realize that this is a fundamental dead end. So instead, they are now working with their local businesses to nurture local jobs and helping those businesses connect with local markets. By redefining their economic problem as a local one, they've been able to take control over forces that previously seemed overwhelming.
Global business creates enormous wealth for the few,
but leaves the great majority worse off. Small business and local economies, on the other hand, can generate wealth in ways that are both more equitable and sustainable.
One of the most important studies that we have on the effects of local business compared the impacts of $100 spent at a local bookstore versus $100 spent at a chain. $100 spent at the local bookstore left $45 in the local economy. $100 spent at the chain left $13. So we get 3 times the income effects, 3 times the jobs, 3 times the tax proceeds for local governments. The principal difference was that the local bookstore had a local high-level management team. It used local lawyers and accountants. It advertised on local radio and TV. None of those things were true of the chain store.
There are movements to localize not only business, but banking and finance as well.
One of the things we have to do is to put finance back into its box. So the re-regulation of the banking sector is vital. Breaking up banks that are too big to fail, or was called too big to fail. Separating speculative functions from high street, main street, retail functions of banking so that money becomes our servant once more rather than our master.
The financial crisis has actually given us a reminder that local banking and local pensions are in fact more stable financial institutions.
If we can have our money at credit unions, where that money is available to the community for community reinvestment and the profits are reinvested in the community, we have a chance for real sustainable growth rather than these huge speculative bubbles caused by financial shenaniganry by big banks.
It's true. There seems to be a disconnect between our professed love of democracy and how we're so willing to accept a dictatorship every day we show up to work. It's not that way at Isthmus Engineering in Wisconsin. They design and build robotic machines for industry. It's a $15 million a year business.
All of the workers are the owners of the business.
And he's not talking about some bullshit stock option. He means they're the true owners.
And it's a democratically run operation where every member has one vote and an equal say.
All in favor? All in favor?
It takes the money out of the equation.
By taking the money out of the equation so that they can call the shots, they end up making more money. Cool, huh?
Why is everybody so obsessed? Money can't buy us happiness. Can we all slow down and enjoy right now? Guaranteed we'll be feeling right.
In San Francisco, government policy now requires all public institutions, from schools and hospitals to prisons, to obtain their food from local sources.
It goes without saying that most of the food that's consumed in this country is consumed by cities. So by definition, citizens within those urban centers should be designing and directing policy around food procurement. So we have an executive order that is advancing a series of principles. One is we want to see more gardens like this throughout at least our city and county. Second, we want to establish new procurement strategies, new purchasing strategies. If we're going to buy food in San Francisco, let's buy it regionally.
Do I know you well enough to call you fellow plunderers? There is not an industrial company on earth, not an institution of any kind, not mine, not yours, not anyone's, that is sustainable. I stand convicted by me, myself alone, not by anyone else, as a plunderer of the earth, but not by our civilization's definition. By our civilization's definition, I'm a captain of industry, in the eyes of many a kind of modern-day hero, but really, the first industrial revolution is flawed, it is not working, it is unsustainable, it is the mistake. And we must move on to another and better industrial revolution and get it right this time. When I think of what could be, I visualize an organization of people committed to a purpose. And the purpose is doing no harm. I see a company that has severed the umbilical cord to earth for its raw materials, taking raw materials that have already been extracted and using them over and over again, driving that process with renewable energy. It is our plan, it remains our plan to climb Mount Sustainability, that mountain that's higher than Everest, infinitely higher than Everest, far more difficult to scale. That point at the top symbolizing zero footprint.
What constitutes a life worthy of being remembered? How do you want to be remembered? It's a whopping question, as grand and important as they come. It shakes you up and gets you thinking about the big existential picture. It's all too easy to just slide from one day to the next on autopilot, being steered by our daily to-do lists. At the end of a life, at the end of your life, when everything else falls away, what essence emerges? What have you filled the world with? In remembering you, which words will others choose? You wonder, don't you? Of all the possible adjectives, I think that if the word kind appears in the mix, chances are very good that you have led a life worthy of being remembered. Kindness acts as a revealing marker that way. Here's something I observed many years ago while romping around the thrift shop. An older woman was struggling to refold a large blanket. Another customer quietly walked over to her, grabbed an end, and together they quickly and efficiently folded the blanket. The old woman thanked the young man, and then everyone went back to their browsing. This act was not major heroic, but it was major kind. A society is actually fueled and propelled by kindness. There's a sort of economics to it. There's a phenomenal book that delves into this very topic. It's called Born to Be Good, and it centers around Gen science. Gen being a Chinese term, not a girl's name. I quote from the book, "Gen was the central idea in the teachings of Confucius, and refers to a complex mixture of kindness, humanity, and respect that transpires between people." Modern Gen science shows that positive and negative interactions can actually be charted, creating what they call a Gen ratio. A high Gen ratio, meaning more positive human interactions than negative, is central to a meaningful life, to goodwill in a school, in a community, even to a thriving society. If there's one thing you remember from our minutes here, remember this book, Born to Be Good, bright yellow cover. So, lucky for us, kindness is an easy and natural thing. All it requires is an awareness of those around you, being in tune to your fellow human. Maybe even, oh, the thought of it, turning our gadgets off for a second. I share this last anecdote from one of my favorite magazines called The Sun. A gentleman went to the doctor with various ailments. The doctor asked questions and listened closely to what the man had to say. After a thorough examination, the doctor scribbled something down on the prescription pad and handed it to the patient. Here's what he prescribed. Less CNN, more Mozart. To round out the cure, I'd add more kindness. Finally, we might ask, how do we, collectively, as a people, want to be remembered? What is our purpose? Who are we? I think the answer is built right into the word. We are mankind. Oh, and about that blanket folding man at the thrift shop? After witnessing that moment, you know what I did? I married him.